Hello, Command229 here with another Topic of the Week video. This week I'll be talking about Legend of Zelda: The Breath of the Wild. This week's topic was submitted by Tumblr user Angel89, and her topic is Breath of the Wild. What Zelda traditions do you love that they broke? What Zelda traditions do you wish they didn't break? What traditions did you love that they kept or did in a way that is still true to the series but also felt fresh? What mechanics in the gameplay are your favorites? Who are your favorite side characters? Favorite moments that you feel are memorable? How do you feel about these new incarnations of Link and Zelda? Is there anything about the game you would change/add? Okay, a long topic. I'll tackle this bit by bit. So what Zelda traditions do I love that they broke? Breath of the Wild broke a lot of series, traditions. And this was very much a part of the game. It was, the whole idea of it was based on breaking from the, I don't want to say rut, but the fact that it had become used, the games had become used to a certain structure. And they wanted to totally break from that. You saw some experimentation of that with games like A Link Between Worlds, where you had basically all the special items that you could get from one spot, and you had to rent them, or you had to get a lot of money to buy them, and then you could tackle each dungeon, pretty much any dungeon in any order. Then you have to figure out which items work best, and it was actually great. But Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild breaks this even further. I thought it was interesting the fact that they didn't have you get specific items from a dungeon. Like, you don't get a bow from a dungeon, you don't get a hookshot from a dungeon. You have, the runes on the Sheikah Slate, and those basically replace it. You have a handful of these, powers. You have the magnetism, you can, freeze something in time for a short bit. All those. And you have those from pretty much the beginning of the game. So going through the game, you have all these abilities, and you can use them in the different shrines and all sorts of stuff. I thought it was interesting. I wouldn't mind if they went back to having standard items, but I wouldn't mind if they expanded on the ideas of the runes. It's just a different idea. I wouldn't consider it inherently better or inherently worse. I just thought it was different, but it was a nice break of pace from the typical go to the dungeon, get the item. Now, one important thing that this does have over the traditional approach is that it meant that all of the abilities had to be useful. They built a lot of shrines based on these abilities, because those are the only ones you could be guaranteed to have, pretty much. One problem that the games had is that a lot of times these items that you get would be too specialized. Twilight Princess, I love Twilight Princess. It's one of my favorite Zelda games. Twilight Princess had a bad problem with having far too many of those items. At some point, some of them became redundant. Like, you had the slingshot, which is neat. But once you get the bow, the slingshot is next to useless. Then you had items like the Dominion Rod, which are cool, but only useful in very specific circumstances. And then you had, stuff like the spinner, which was really cool, but outside of the dungeon that it was introduced in, and outside of a couple of spots in the overworld, totally useless. Barely has any use, even, as an attack. You have the ball and chain, which is neat, and can do a lot of damage, but it's impractical to use in normal battle. And that did leave you with a lot of items that you just did not need. So the runes cut down on that. Now this can be fixed, I think. You can do it like in Link Between Worlds, and have these items be just, you can use these items, whenever you want, as long as you buy them or rent them. Or, you can just go back to the original approach. But if they go back to the original approach, or incorporate that in some way, it would be very important that they make these special items actually useful. I like the idea that they cut down on the number of items, or in this case, abilities with the Sheikah Slate, so you only had a handful. That's all you had to worry about. So that was obviously, alright, we have these tools, so we can build all of these, these puzzles and dungeons and stuff, and shrines really, around. So I like that. It makes all the runes useful, and no matter what part of the game that I'm in, I always find use for pretty much all of the runes. And that's impressive, because one of the problems the Zelda series has had is, well, getting bogged down by useless items. Even stuff like Skyward Sword, the last major one, it had a problem with some of that too. Like, the whip was kind of had some uses. The I forgot what it was called. I think it was the Gust Bellows, the one where it was like the big thing jarring, was like blue. That was mostly for one dungeon. It had some other uses, but it wasn't all that useful. But I do like this approach. I would definitely like them to bring in previous special items. Maybe even to have some special items in conjunction with the runes. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see what they come up with. But I definitely would love to see things like the hookshot return, especially with the ability to climb on stuff. Because I remember when I was a kid, and I was playing Wind Waker, one of the things that I had this love, I had this idea when I was a kid of being able to hookshot to something and just being able to climb on everything. So when they announced that ability, you could climb on anything in Breath of the Wild, I was beyond stoked. But imagine having the hookshot, and being able to grab onto stuff and then being able to just climb from there instead of just using it on specific spots. I do know that they were originally planning to have a hookshot rune, so hopefully that means that in the next Zelda game they'll incorporate that, but who knows. Another Zelda tradition that I wouldn't say that I love that they broke is the dungeon setup. Now, we do basically get equivalent content, I would say, with the 120 and then with the new DLC plus shrines that use mostly the runes. I would say that with all of the shrines combined, and all the overworld, shrine, puzzles, by your shrines combined, it's about equivalent to what you would have with dungeons at the other Zeldas. I don't know, I haven't done actual math on this, and I haven't seen anyone do math, but I feel like there was enough time. It's just, it's about equivalent. It's just broken up into small pieces, and you use those shrines as basically your fast travel. I like that setup. I like the shrine setup, and I like the fact that you can use them. You can basically just go up to them and fast travel. If they're going, I have a feeling they're going to continue with the overworld or the open world setup. But I do hope that that they will definitely include the fast travel. I don't know about the shrines being stuck as those puzzles. Maybe I'm fine with them. I like them, but if they do another game with this setup, I do hope that they do include more traditional dungeons. I like the this is going to be a bit about that one. The one that I feel like a little bit later in this, but one I do feel like they kept the same was the dungeon setup, sort of, with the divine beasts. You still have basically a dungeon. It's just not as big. It's more compact than other dungeons, because you only have that divine beast instead of being a sometimes expansive dungeon. But it still is a dungeon, and I still feel it counts. It's just not as big, but you also have all of the 120 plus shrines to do. So I feel like in that regard, I'm fine with it, because it's still nice to be able to just go into a dungeon like you go into a divine beast. There are a lot of traditions that are broke, so I won't go over every single little one, but a tradition that they did break that I actually thought was really interesting was, with the weapons. Now, there are downsides to the breakable weapons, but this does actually get you to use a lot more types of weapons. Like, you have axes, you have spears, you have swords, and all that sort of stuff. And you get different, and you're forced to use a lot of these different weapons, because you don't want to, certain weapons you want to kind of save for certain encounters, or else they'll break. This does get you to hoarding some powerful weapons, and I know I mean by now I have like 8 royal broadswords just kind of sitting in my inventory. I only use them when the master sword breaks, but I like that setup. I'm sure they'll end up tweaking it, in the next game if they use it, because if they're going to do an open world, they're probably going to be using that again, and I like that. Specifically, I like that because, well, this actually gives use to other weapons. It expands on ideas that you had from previous Zelda games like Wind Waker, where certain enemies' weapons would be dropped, and you could pick them up and you could use them for a little bit, and then you'd have to drop it at some point. But I did like how you can keep these weapons and you could use them, and you could just, you could use all sorts of different crazy weapons, and you can keep them in your inventory and then use them whenever you wanted until they broke. But I like that, and it was a nice mix-up. The story is definitely another tradition that they broke, and this is one I'm not as big on. I always really like the Zelda stories, and while there is a story to this, I mean, some people say there is no story. There is a story to this. It's just told in a much simpler way. It's definitely more focused on the world and the gameplay than it is with the actual story. The story is used more as a framing device for the game, which I like, and I do like the story bits that we get. I would hope that in the next game that they move forward with having more focus on story. Like, you made your point with Breath of the Wild. You can tell a story with fairly minimal, but I want more interaction with Ganondorf, or whatever villain that they have in the next game. I want more interactions with Zelda. I want to see more of these characters, and a lot of these cutscenes, in fact, every single cutscene, until you get to the end, I believe, well, most all of them, take place in the past. And I mean, the setup of the game supports this, because you need to find out what happened in the past to figure out, why things happened the way they did. But I do hope that, next time around we get more, focused, story. Now, I don't want them, if they're going to do open world, they did it right without having too much super hyper focus on the story, like some modern Zelda games have. Skyward Sword had a lot of focus on the story. But I do like these stories, and I want more of these stories. But I don't want them to cut back on the story just for the game, because I want them to balance it a little bit more. Because we had our game here that I put almost 200 hours on my Wii U version, but I really hope that they have add more story and have more story take place in the present time, so that we get it. Because I'm totally fine with that. I'm fine with that. You made your point with Breath of the Wild. I want some more story next time. Now, in terms of Zelda traditions that I wish they didn't break, I'm fine with the way they handled pretty much everything. The story is, like I said, is probably the one that I felt the most, not bad, but it's the one that I wish that next time we get more. I like the story, and I like the setup, and there actually is a lot of story in it. It's just not directly told via cutscenes. Like, you get a lot of story when you get to the diaries, particularly with the new DLC that they added, and they added the diaries of the different champions. You get a lot of information on these characters. I remember when I found Zelda's diary and I was reading it, that is a freaking journey. And I love that. And I hope that they actually incorporate more of that into the future, but I want more of this story directly told. Yeah, there's a hard time picking things that aren't really that I hate that they broke. Because I don't really hate anything about the game. There's a reason why the game is considered so amazing and is giving such great accolades. So, it's hard to say there's nothing that I hated that they broke. There's just stuff that I'm like, I kind of wish that they did a little bit different. But really, that boils down to the story, and that's pretty much it. I mean, sure, yeah, the dungeon stuff is what I wish that they would bring back, but, and, I like the fact that they have voice acting. That's another tradition that they broke. They actually have legitimate voice acting, and I love it. I actually really like it, because they use it minimally. They don't have every single character talking. If they increased the number to some NPCs, I'd be fine with that. But the fact that we have primary, significant, plot-important characters talking, great. I love it. I want more. And this is one of the reasons why I really think it improved the cutscenes. And I really think it really helped the scenes with Zelda. And because, her voice actress sold those scenes. And honestly, it took me. I do admit it took me a little bit of warming up with these the voice acting, because I'm not used to actual legit voice acting in the Zelda games. But I did like it a lot more than having to read everything. I mean, there are still parts that you have to read, and I would actually compare it a bit to the Professor Layton games. That's a good series where the cutscenes are all voiced, and some parts of the dialogue are voiced, but then there are a lot of parts that you just have to read. Now, I don't ever expect Zelda to be completely, voiced. And I mean, okay, but they did. I also have to say they did it right by not having Link talk. That's important. They actually wrote it into his character that he doesn't talk a lot. And they actually gave legitimate reasons why, and actually had certain things like his conflict with Zelda that you read about in her journal that actually is built on the fact that he doesn't talk. And he does actually talk, he just simply chooses not to. And I thought that was really interesting, and I really hope that they delve into that a little bit more by having, legitimate reasons why Link isn't talking, or he's just quiet most of the time. And the only times he's talking are the times when you get to select little things to say. Other than that, they did that really right. And true to the series, I do have to say that in terms of the dungeons being the divine beasts, in terms of feeling fresh, I like how they feel, and I like how each of them has a specific, I would say, gimmick in terms of what you can do with them. Like, you can move some of them in certain ways, and then that will affect it. Like, what was it? Was it Ratas? Or am I thinking of Halo when I say Ratas? Anyway, it's the big elephant one in Zora's Domain. When you have the water and you can move the trunk and move when it's putting the water, that'll actually affect things in it. And I like that. And I like these stuff, and I don't necessarily need this to be in future games, but it's actually neat that each of them had that specific gimmick of, what you have one thing that you can do in there that will affect various different parts of it. It will affect puzzles, it will affect movement, it'll affect certain ways of how you move around. I like that. And even though the dungeons aren't as expansive, I like how they all had that. And I did like the dungeons. I like the Divine Beasts. Like I said, I hope the next time around we get at least a few legitimate, full-on dungeons. What mechanics of the gameplay are my favorite? That one is probably going to be the runes. That's probably one of my favorite ones. I love how you can just click, switch them on the fly. And I do think that when we get to if they bring back main items, like significant key items that you use, they'll probably have a similar setup where you can basically pause and then you select it. And they may have a quick slot selections like they do in all the other older games, but I do think that I did like how the runes worked, and I liked how they built the game around the runes, because those are pretty much the only thing you are guaranteed to have on you. So that was one of my favorite mechanics. I love the open world overall. Nintendo somehow, in the first time they try an actual full-on real open world, they do it better than most everyone else. They did it better than Metal Gear Solid V, The Phantom Pain. They even did open world stealth better, but okay, that may be a bit of an exaggeration because it's not an actual stealth game, but I did have fun playing stealth in Zelda for the first time actually being able to do that. I love the not the runes. I love the shrines. I like the fact that we got these little bite-sized dungeons, and that every time you got to basically a fast travel point, you could open up one of these. And I like the different challenges that they had. Some of them got a little repetitive. The tests of strength. Once you get strong enough, those tests of strength become they're done like that. I mean, even the major tests of strength. Yeah, I was done. If they bring something like that back again, I would really hope that they actually diversify the challenges you have instead of it just being one of those little mini guardian things. But I mean, I would love to see something similar to that come back, but with more different types of, you know, enemies, or if they're similar in terms of like the Sheikah tech. I would hope that they diversify the kind of challenge they provide, because you fight pretty much all of them the same way, except for just a few slight differences. Some of them are just a little stronger, or some of them are a lot stronger. But overall, I like the shrines, and I like a lot of the challenges. Some of my favorite moments of the games come from shrines, and I remember like some of them. Like I remember there was this one puzzle that I had where you had this sort of like waterfall. So you have to use the little ice block rune, and you have to carefully let a ball fall into a specific spot, and you have to guide it to that. And you have to use the ice blocks. You have to use stasis. You have to watch where it's going, make sure that it's going to the right spot. And I like that stuff. And I like a lot of these challenges. Like, there's some of them that actually provide some decent challenges. There's sometimes I spend a good amount of time trying to figure those out. The Nintendo's, capacity to make puzzles, still top game. So that's one of the best parts of the shrines. Other new mechanics. I actually like the fact that you had horses, that you could actually use these horses to get around significantly, but once you actually start needing to travel from one point of the map to another, you'll spend a lot of time just traveling from fast travel points. I did like the fact that in the DLC they added that armor that lets you teleport your horse wherever you are. Now, I do hope that if they do the open world stuff the next game, that sort of stuff will be available at the very least fairly early on, or the ability to get it. Because honestly, once you completed the game, you don't really need it as much. And also, once you get the Master Cycle Zero, like I did, you really don't need a horse, because the Master Cycle Zero is kind of just better overall. So, I mean, those are the things that they introduced, in the DLC, and I do hope that stuff like that will be incorporated into the base game next time around. But I did like that. And the Master Cycle Zero, I really like that. Like, you get pretty much an actual legit motorcycle, but it's like ancient Sheikah technology. That was great. I like that. I thought that was hilarious. And it's really useful. And the gas it runs on is just literally any items that you can throw in there. And by that point in the game, you have thousands of spare stuff, particularly monster parts. Yeah, I have Lizalfo's talons. Like, I have 400 something of those. So yeah, just throw 5 in and fill it up. It's like, yeah, so I like that. And I do hope that we get more stuff like that later on in the next game. I mean, I'd love to see the return of the Master Cycle Zero, just because it's such a cool it's such a cool idea, and it's fun. I played around with it. It's fun. But yeah, I really did love that one, especially because I love getting into these jousting matches with the Bokoblins. But yeah, I like the Guardians as like overworld like sort of mini bosses. The only problem I have with them is that once you get near the end game, they stop becoming something that you're terrified of, and they just become an annoyance. I haven't not been killed by them since I got the Hylian shield, and I perfected being able to the shield reflection, so you can shoot their beams back out. I'm like, boom, boom, all right, no, they're pretty much dead. Or once you get the Master Sword and just start cutting off their legs, and it's like, yeah, this is really easy. Yeah, those are great. Oh, and I love the cooking mechanic. I actually got a little notebook, and I would actually experiment, and I would write down like recipes and what they did and what bonuses they got, and that is the first time in years, since I was a kid, that I'd actually started writing notes down for a game. in all these years of playing games, you know, I have not, since I was a kid, until Breath of the Wild, written down notes. And I remember when I came back to it for the DLC, and I wanted to, I was trying to prepare, because I needed, you know, because, you know, you have to face a big boss for the final, you know, dungeon. And you do have other, you know, challenges that you do. I was actually going through and I was like, hey, I need some recipes. So I went back and I referred to my notes. And I'm like, alright, I'll do da 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 da. And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll need, you know, the health, you know, I'll need, you know, those extra hearts. And I'm like, and I realized, I hadn't done this since I was a kid. That is a great mechanic. I really want them to bring cooking back. I loved cooking, and I loved experimenting, and I loved playing around with that. Played around with that so much. In my, like, a lot of, like, I probably spent, like, an hour. Well, like, when I was writing down my notes, I probably spent, like, an hour just, you know, experimenting with food and, you know, going out and getting certain ingredients, you know, to see what they would do. And I haven't felt that inspired in years. Well over a decade. Well over a decade. And that was nostalgic for me. But yeah, there's a lot with this. One thing I do love is the fact that one of the mechanics, and this actually goes down to the DLC. They very, very rarely tell you to just go to a place and do this. Oftentimes you'll have some sort of riddle you have to figure out, and some of them are simple. But I noticed that this, especially when I was trying to find the DLC items, because you don't just get the DLC items. It's not like they just drop a chest in your house and go, alright, here it is. No, you get riddles. You get riddles and hints that you have to figure out for all of these. And for the DLC, like, you know, the scenario that has you going all over Hyrule to figure out, you know, what to do, you have to figure out those things. And you know, there are sometimes when I do admit one of them I actually had to look up, but for all the other ones I actually, you know, sat down, figured it out, had to pull on my knowledge of the game that I had played, you know, over the 180 hours, and had to figure things out myself, and that is good. You know, the fact that, you know, pretty much all the side quests, you know, they do list your side quests, and sometimes they'll tell you, yeah, you know, sometimes they'll just say, hey, you can go to this area. But for a lot of it, it's figuring it out yourself, and I like that. Oh, I also like how they don't just dot your map with mini missions and, you know, side collectibles. It's, you gotta find it all yourself. Nintendo knows how to make a game. This isn't a Ubisoft open world game where they litter your map with so much crap you can't even see the map. So I did like that. And, you know, speaking of mechanics, this will be probably the last one I talk about. I like how they took the concept of the Ubisoft towers and they made it not suck. I actually enjoyed going after the different towers to fill out the map, because that's all they do. They just give you the terrain for that, you know, section of the map. And that's it. It's funny, making it less complicated made it more fun. And some of them actually required some specific challenges of figuring out exactly how to get to the top, because some of them are actually kind of hard to figure out, because you look at them and you can't just climb it, you have to figure out all these things. And it's so neat figuring out, talking to other people and seeing how other people reacted of how they got to the top, because some of them came up with really simple solutions. Some of them were like, yeah, I climbed to this really high part and I just parachuted over the thing, or I paraglided over the thing. Some was like, oh yeah, I created a bonfire and flew up. Or one of them is like, yeah, I found you can knock over these stone bridges and climb onto them and get up to the top. And it's so interesting that they came up with these challenges. A lot of them are really simple challenges. And one of them is simply the fact that one is just surrounded by guardians. But it's fun seeing how people came up with these different solutions, and it's that kind of gameplay that allows for a player expression that is so fun, and it's so fun to talk about, just to compare notes to each other. So yeah, that's it. I could talk about this more, but I'm gonna cut off on that one. Who are your favorite side characters? In terms of side characters, I loved, you know, I mean, I love the successors, but I also really love the original champions. My favorite of them is probably Urbosa, and not just because I love her ability that she gives you, the Urbosa's Fury, which is extremely helpful on a lot of enemies and even bosses. But I also love her character overall. Finding out that because especially when you read Urbosa's diary, you realize that she was like a mother to Zelda. After Zelda's mother died, Urbosa was like a good friend of her mother's and basically took on a motherly figure role to Zelda. And you get a bit of this in the cutscenes where you can kind of see, particularly the one that I think it's the one. Yeah, it's the one where you get when you fight her divine beast, and you get the cutscene related to that. And the way you see Urbosa and Zelda interact, she's very much like a mother to her. And that was like, oh, my heart. I love Daruk. Daruk is great. I always love the Gorons in Zelda. The Gorons are always great. But I love how Daruk was just this big, friendly guy, likes to eat lots of rocks. And, the fact that he's this grand, great hero. He was fun, especially when you read his diary. I love the diary that they got from the Champions Ballad DLC, where you find out his friendship with Link, and the fact that how much he loves to eat the rocks, the rock roast, and him trying to get Link to eat it too. But of course, Hylians can't eat rocks. They have so much personality. Rivali is great. All the champions are great. Rivali, yeah. He's such a douchebag. He reminds me of Falco. Sometimes I expect him to just say, hands off my prey. Because, shoot, he's even got the colors. But, he was great. And it's interesting seeing his character development and his character insecurities, especially with the Champions Battle DLC. You get to see that he had a lot of, feeling like he had to live up to these expectations, and his supreme jealousy over Link being chosen as the champion, as the main champion to defeat Ganon over him. And you see him ultimately sort of come to begrudgingly respect Link. And I love Mipha. Everyone loves Mipha. Mipha is great. And, I mean, she's adorable, and it's so sad, because, she has these unrequited feelings for Link, and especially when you find out that she had basically prayed to, I always forget her name, the water sage from Ocarina of Time. She was the Zora princess in that game. I can see her. I can't remember what her name was. But, how she had a crush on Link, obviously. And Mipha was, praying to her that Link would return her feelings. And it's just like, oh dear. Especially when you see that Link and Zelda obviously have a thing. And Mipha just... the real MVP here. Because she takes this gracefully and is supportive. And I'm like, oh, wow. And the fact that, she died, and you see her interactions with Sidon as a little itty bitty, Zora Tyke, and, the cutscenes are very few, and the story is fairly light, but they still manage to captivate me and a lot of other people with the story and the characters. There are a lot of other, minor characters in it. I do like the King. I like the King for the simple role he played. I do like the Impa and her sister. I think it was her sister. And the fact that she had, gosh, I can't remember her name. It's been a while since I've actually played, since I've been by her little hut, where her workshop in Hateno, next to Hateno Village. But it's funny. It's I did like seeing Impa, and she's old, and it kind of reminds me of how she was in Skyward Sword, and in some other games. But oh, I need to talk about this real quick. I love that we get to see the Sheikah as an actual culture. I cannot tell you, when I was first playing the game, and I rode my horse into Kakariko Village, and I saw a bunch of Sheikah. That made me emotional. I'll talk about that when I get. I'll talk about a little bit about that when I get to my favorite moments. But that was great. a lot of the side characters. I like her. I think it was Impa's granddaughter, who basically takes care of the. She takes care of things around, and she has an obvious crush on Link, because pretty much all the women are so thirsty for Link in this game. It's ridiculous. A lot of the little minor characters are entertaining, but I can't go over all of them. And surprisingly, despite the fact that this game doesn't really have much in the way of villages, it only has a couple, they still manage to have a lot of characters. But I can't go over all of those. So I'll just keep it at the main characters, because I really liked a lot of these characters. And a lot of people were worried that there wouldn't be many NPCs in the game. But shoot, were we proven wrong. Even the stable huts all have a handful at least of NPCs. But oh yeah, I can't forget Beetle. The fact that Beetle's in this game is a traveling salesman. That was great. And I used him to sell all the crap I didn't need to make lots of money. Then just bought all of his arrows. But yeah, I'll keep it like that. I'll keep it at that so I don't go too long on this. Favorite moments that I feel memorable. There are a lot of memorable moments in this game. Holy crap! But I'll try to keep a few of my favorites. One, like I said, walking into Kakariko Village and seeing the Sheikah, because I didn't know about that when I started playing the game. So when I first, it says, okay, you have to, get to, you go to Impa. And then you see there's a village, Kakariko Village, and it's not just some lonely, desolate place. She's surrounded by a rebuilt Sheikah, and after all these years of seeing Impa as either like the last of her kind or some of the only Sheikah, knowing that going from Ocarina of Time to Twilight Princess and now to Breath of the Wild, we see that even though there are things that had gone to crap, the Sheikah rebuilt. And this, it's underrated moment for a lot of people. But seeing the Sheikah again, just walking in and seeing all these Sheikah, I was like, oh my gosh, it was a great moment. I mean, I'd have to say a lot of my favorite moments are simply just gameplay moments. They really created unique player experiences with this. Like, the first time I ran into a Guardian, yeah, I died. I was terrified. I was running away, and it's just like, boom! I'm like, oh crap. The first time I encountered the Blood Moon, that took me off guard, like, whoa. And when you get that cutscene playing and Zelda warning you of it, that was great. Basically any time you got to one of those memories, like hunting down the memories and trying to figure out the significance that each of them had, that was great. In terms of the story may be simple, but a lot of the story is told in a very simple way, and you get only bits and pieces of it, but figuring out things that happened 100 years ago was great. And actually, I hunted down a lot of these, and again, like I said before, it doesn't tell you where these are. You get a hint. You get these pictures, and you have to figure out where that is. And some of them are easy, some of them are a little more obscure, but I found all of them. And you get all these memories. A lot of these memories are with Zelda, and you get to really see a lot of her relationship with Link. And you get to see a lot of these interactions, like her going to the Spring of Power, and you get to see all these interactions, her resentfulness of him, and even at and you get that one memory that takes place chronologically later, where you have after basically everything had gone all to hell, the champions are dead, and Link and Zelda are basically fighting for their life to survive, and it's a heartbreaking moment. I mean, all this stuff happens. Everything had to go to crap for things to end up how they are in the game, but like that one, it was shown in the trailer, but that one part where Zelda just starts crying into Link's shoulder, and it's just like, in context, once you learn the whole context, it's just like, wow, Nintendo, you have a simple story here, but you're still ripping my heart out. That was great. A bit of a spoiler for the end of the game. when you beat Ganon and you see Zelda again, that was a great moment, knowing that after all of that hundreds of years that she was trapped fighting Ganon and keeping him, locked up, that she's finally free. That will always stick with me, especially because right before, for the final boss, I got the Twilight Princess garb, and I changed into that so that Link looked, like his traditional Link green outfit during those final cutscenes. So that really added to the experience for that he was in his classic green garb. All right, I'll pick one more memorable moment. I have to say, the first time I went up against one of the Blight Ganons, the bosses did get sort of a little repetitive. Not really, because they were all built around specific gimmicks, but the first time I went up against him, that Blight gimmick, Blight Ganon, I think it was the Water Blight. When I went to Zora's Domain, because that was the first one that I went to, and the first Divine Beast that I went up against. Holy crap, was that a terrifying experience, because I got my butt whooped. I had to come up with all these, because I only had 6 hearts, and yeah, I had to do the grind to get more shrines and get more hearts to go up against it, and make all these potions. They gave me all these extra hearts, all these defense potions that I took to beat it, and that was memorable, and I'll always remember that. I mean, there's so many memories I'll have with this. A lot of them are from the cutscenes, some of them are just from gameplay, but there are so many ones that I could fill up an hour-long video just talking about all of that. And I don't want to make this too long, and I know I keep saying that, but I legit could go on for a long time with Breath of the Wild. How do you feel about these new incarnations of Link and Zelda? I love this Link and Zelda. I wasn't sure about it at first, and I wasn't even sure about Zelda, but holy crap, I love Link and Zelda in this game. Link gets more characterization in this, ironically, considering it is a lighter story, than a lot of the other games. The only ones that it really has to compete with are things like Skyward Sword, which does explicitly build a lot on the character, particularly in terms of the relationship with Zelda. The fact that his relationship with Zelda is explicitly romantic, and there are a lot of really heavy moments that it really builds on. And, a lot of people complain about the beginning of Skyward Sword. I love the opening of Skyward Sword, where it has a lot of character and story building first before you're thrust into the actual story. But, with this, they managed to do a lot of characterization for Link and Zelda. I love the fact that this Zelda is a researcher. She wants to research. She wants to work with the Sheikah technology. She's always working with the Sheikah slate. And she's always trying to figure things out. But she has that conflicting with her duties as the Princess Zelda. And now she has this powerful magic that she needs to work on. But it's difficult for her. And her mother died when she was young, so she never actually really got to learn it much. So she's been struggling for her life with it, and she sort of pours herself into research for it, because she feels like that's the one thing that she can actually do. And, when she's trying so hard to do all of this, and she has all of her conflict with her dad, and shoot, when you find the King's Diary, yeah, I mean, they do that a lot in this game. And it's like, you get this, characterization that's so much deeper when you actually find their journals. The King seems like he's kind of a authoritarian jerk when you see him in that one cutscene telling Zelda what to do. But then you get to his journal, and you find out that he's only doing this because he feels like he has to. He feels like he's trying to play the role of the king, and he's trying to play the role of the father, and he's trying to make sure Zelda's doing her duty. But even in his journal, he says he's feeling like he's being too hard on her, and he wants to, so hopefully they can get everything resolved so that things can calm down. I'm just like, and they can relax on that stuff, and I'm just like, this game broke my heart in too many ways. But you see Zelda in her conflict with Link, and this is so interesting because I didn't expect this at first. You see this a bit in the cutscenes. You get a lot of this with Zelda's journal that you find in Hyrule Castle. But when you see the way that it's when you see the way that Zelda actually had great resentment for Link, I was like, oh, didn't really expect it to be that deep. and then she feels like he's just some sort of like lackey that's here to, restrict her, and ultimately finding out that no, he's really not, and that he's got just as much pressure on him. He's got to wield the Master Sword. He's got to fight Ganon himself. He's actually got to be the one to do the actual literal heavy lifting, and actually lift that sword and just kill Ganon with it. And and the fact that his silence is all born from him trying to basically keep a strong face and a strong persona, despite the fact that he's got so much intense stress and pressure on him to succeed. And that was this is some of the deepest characterization I've seen for Link. And it's all told from other people's perspectives, and that was great. And especially when you see how Zelda warms up to Link, and especially when you see her connecting to him, and they end up having a very strong, very close bond, that was great. And it makes the ending of the game, where you see Link and Zelda interact for that little bit, so much greater when you've seen all of the flashbacks, you've read the diaries, once you do all that stuff in the game, and then you get to that ending, it gives it so much more emotional weight. Link and Zelda in this are probably some of my favorite Link and Zeldas, just out of the entire history. And Nintendo knew what they were doing. The story may have been lighter overall, and the game may have been focused almost entirely on the gameplay itself, but they did know how to do a lot of this characterization, and they still got it when it comes to being emotional. And I got emotional during Skyward Sword, but I also got emotional during Breath of the Wild, and it's more so than some of the other Zelda games. And that, I congratulate you, Nintendo, for getting me so invested in this new Link and Zelda. And even when I wasn't as sure I was going to, you proved my doubts wrong. Is there anything about the game you would change or add? There's a lot of ideas that I had, and I want to kind of make a video all about these, anything from sensible additions to just totally oddball, crazy things that I would add to the game. But if there's anything I would change, like I said before, I would probably add just a few real dungeons, because it's actually far more interesting with this idea of having an open world and being able to go into a full-scale dungeon, that's in the open world. I like that idea, and I kind of wish we got a little bit more of that. That's something that I would change, and it's something I hope they do in the next Zelda game. You have an open world, you got the shrines, and you also have, I would say, just 4, 5 or so standard traditional dungeons. Maybe not make them required. Maybe you get special items in this that make things easier but aren't required. Maybe there's a hookshot in one of these dungeons. Maybe you have a hookshot in this that you don't need to, and it may be separate from maybe a similar rune power, but it will make things easier, and it will give you more things. Maybe there's something maybe a gust bellows or a whip or something like that, or the skull hammer from not Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, or something, stuff like that, where you have special items that are separate, and maybe you have to go into these dungeons, because the dungeons that could actually make the dungeons optional, and maybe these dungeons open up certain quests, or maybe they can add more to the story, or maybe they are required. Who knows? There's a lot of different ways they can take this, but that's something that I personally, if I was doing this game, I would have. Maybe you would cut down on the shrines, maybe. No, they do have to have a lot of shrines because of the fast travel, but then you'd have shrines, and you'd have actual full-on dungeons. I mean, I did like the Divine Beasts, but I missed the traditional Zelda dungeons that you would spend sometimes a few hours in just going through, because those always were so great, and I would hope that they bring that back. In terms of changes, there are some minor changes, things like the being able that when you get the bridle and saddle that that can teleport your horse wherever you are. I would include stuff like that fairly early on. That would make, once you get to fast travel points, that makes horses a lot more viable, because you don't have to keep abandoning your horse. You can just whistle and call him wherever you are. I like that. Some of these ideas, like having a temporary teleportation medallion that you can put down, and you could just warp there pretty much. You can just go back there at any time. I like that. I would probably incorporate that fairly early on so that you can use it. Because at this point, a lot of us, like myself, we've already completed the game, and I'd probably have to go back and start a new save file in order to make use of that, to make real good use of that. I would like there to be more story, a more direct story. I did like what they did, and I don't even mind that they have some extra story, that all the story is pretty much optional. Because that all falls into the mindset that the game had, where it was gameplay first and story second, in that the primary focus is on the gameplay, and that was good. It's a video game, that's the most important part, but I would like more traditional story. But I do have to say, if I had to add stuff, just straight up adding stuff, not changing things, I would add more side quests involving a lot of these other characters. Like when you get to that one Hateno research and the other research, the Akala Research Center. When you get to those, I really wish that we got more to do there. I really do wish, because I like those characters involved. But once you do the initial like quests, you really don't need to go back there, except for the Akala one, and that's if you bring the ancient parts to fashion like things like the arrows, the ancient arrows, or some other things out of it. But I rarely. Well, once I got like 30 ancient arrows, I was pretty much good for. Because since those are so powerful, you don't really need to use them much, and you want to save them for stuff like guardians you really don't want to deal with, or enemies you want to evaporate, or some bosses that you can just do a lot of damage to. But I mean, there's more, and there's a video that I've been wanting to do that would talk about just all the stuff that I could add to the game, and I might do that, but really that would take far too long to talk about here. But really, there's not a whole lot I would change. Oh, I would change some of the fighting mechanics, like being able to move while you're slashing. I do kind of miss that, because you have to stop when you're attacking and doing your basic combo. I would also love to see like the return of like the sort of changeable adaptive combos that you can change depending on what you're doing. I remember that mostly in Wind Waker, where you could actually get you can change the combo up to where you're so that Link does different attacks depending on how you're holding the analog stick. I would love to see more like that with more in-depth combat system, and I hope they do that in the next game. But I did kind of miss that, but considering they had a lot of different types of weapons, I'm fine with it. I just really wish that we had the ability to move while we were attacking, and I mostly say that because that makes it easier to cut down grass. I know it sounds silly, but that is kind of an important part of Zelda. I also wish we got more pots to break. I do kind of wish that we have more pots and grass, and you get more rupees from them. I mean, you can find rupees in under rocks and stuff, but I do hope that they bring that back, because it's always been sort of a staple. And I would hope that we bring back pots that I would hope that hitting them doesn't do anything for your weapon, like damage meter, for how much hits it can take. Just so that we can bring back the breaking pots as a classic Zelda mechanic. I know a lot of fans would be happy about that. But one change that I'm just going to straight up say, I want Link to be left-handed again. I understood it for Skyward Sword because with the motion controls, and some people were thrown off by having Link be left-handed, but a lot of people are right-handed. I kind of wish that we could just like switch it if we wanted to, but But I understood that. In this one, Link is, I don't mind. I really don't care, about Link. I don't super duper care. I didn't care in this game that Link was right-handed, but I really wish that Link was. If we're going to be having more traditional controls, I kind of want Link to be left-handed just because it's series tradition. But that's pretty much it. There is more that I could talk about, but I don't want this video to go like an hour long. So I'm just going to finish it out right there. So if you want to submit a topic to me, you just follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. And if you're on YouTube, you can simply comment below for what you want me to talk about. Or if you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and do topic : and then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Just if you want to watch last week's topic video, you can click that here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when you get that done. And thank you for watching.